If you've ever been stabbed in the back, underestimated, or left to pick up the pieces someone else shattered, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready. Because this isn't just a story of betrayal, it's the ultimate comeback. And oh, it was worth every second of the wait. 10 years ago, I thought I was building my dream. I had poured every ounce of passion, time, and energy into a small but promising startup in the tech logistics space. The kind of company that could have revolutionized how small businesses tracked and optimized inventory. And I wasn't alone. Back then, my co-founder, let's call him Darren, was someone I thought of as a brother. We had met in college. Both of us broke, hungry, and idealistic. He was slick with presentations. I was the architect, the brains behind the product, while Darren worked the rooms, pitched the ideas, and secured early investors. At least, that's what I believed. Our roles were clear. I built the engine, and Darren drove the car. And at first it worked. We were nobodies with a clever prototype and a few small clients. But momentum was building. Word of mouth spread. A handful of industry blogs picked us up. Then we landed a meeting with a mid-sized distributor who offered a six-figure pilot contract. A huge deal for us. The night we signed that deal, Darren hugged me and said, "We made it, man. Just the beginning." What I didn't know then was that it wasn't the beginning of our success. It was the beginning of my betrayal. Looking back, I realized there were signs. Emails I wasn't copied on. Meetings Darren said I didn't need to attend. Contract he assured me he'd take care of. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I was buried in code, debugging our back-end systems to handle the new client load. He was managing investors, hiring, and external relationships. It made sense to divide and conquer. But over time, things got strange. Clients started asking questions I didn't have answers to. A developer we brought on told me he was working on a new feature direction I had never approved. And when I finally tried to log into our financial dashboard, the one we had set up together, my access was gone. I remember confronting Darren late one night in our office. I asked why I'd been locked out. He brushed it off with a smile. "Oh man, sorry. We had to make a quick admin change for compliance stuff. I'll get it fixed." It never was. 3 weeks later, I arrived at the office, and my key card didn't work. The front desk guy looked up at me awkwardly and said, Darren told me you weren't coming in anymore." I thought it was a joke. I laughed, shrugged, said maybe there was a mix-up. Then I got the email. A cold, 2-paragraph message from Darren saying the board had decided to go in a different direction. That they were grateful for my early contributions, but that the company was restructuring and I was no longer needed. Except here's the thing. There was no board. It was just the two of us. I tried everything. Emails, phone calls, even legal advice. But Darren was clever. Turns out, months before, he had restructured the company on paper, pushing me out quietly by altering documents and forging a vote to remove me. The IP I created? He filed new patents under his name. The equity I thought I held? Turns out he had reallocated in a shady dilution scheme right before a funding round. In the eyes of the law, I had nothing. No company, no shares, no access. Just a name on some early concept sketches and a gut full of rage. For weeks, I spiraled. I drank too much, slept too little. Friends stopped calling. Nobody wanted to be around someone so bitter, so lost. My bank account was nearly empty. My reputation? Shaky. Some of the very people who once praised my ideas now thought I was the problem. Darren had gotten ahead of the story. He told people I couldn't handle the growth, that I walked away under pressure. I wanted to scream, to burn it all down, but I didn't. Instead, I went quiet, and I started planning. I wish I could say I got back on my feet quickly, that I just flipped a switch and became the comeback kid. But no, it took years. In the beginning, I was angry at the world. I wanted immediate justice, a dramatic confrontation, a lawsuit, public humiliation. But all I had were 2 hands, a worn-out laptop, and a soul that felt cracked. I couldn't even code for months. Every line I wrote reminded me of the platform Darren stole. I scraped by with gig work, fixing broken WordPress sites, debugging sloppy back-end code from overseas contractors. It was humiliating work for someone who had co-founded a 6-figure startup. But I took every job, and in the quiet spaces between them, when the screen blurred and the coffee was cold, I started learning. Not just technical stuff. I began reading legal case studies, corporate forensics, how fraud really works in the startup space, how founders hide money, manipulate boards, steal credit. And then I learned how to follow digital footprints. Not many people know this, but if someone's arrogant enough, they leave crumbs everywhere. And Darren? Darren was practically a bakery. It started with a LinkedIn post. 3 years after I'd been pushed out, Darren was now the golden boy of mid-tier tech. He had been featured in Fast Company, was speaking at conferences, and had closed a Series B round, $12 million from a venture capital firm I once dreamed of pitching to. But buried in his post, celebrating the funding win, he tagged a junior developer, someone I remembered interviewing myself back in the early days. That kid, now a mid-level engineer, had posted a comment that caught my eye. Crazy to think we launched the core routing algorithm from the old warehouse days. That code still lives on. Wait, the core routing algorithm? I had written that, alone, and I had never open-sourced it, never licensed it. It was proprietary, my proprietary work. So how was it still alive? I created a burner GitHub account and started digging. Darren's company, now branded something flashy and buzzwordy like Neural Port, had a few public API demos. I tore them apart. Under the surface, the fingerprints were unmistakable. Old variable names. A weird workaround I'd written in desperation one night when the data formatting kept crashing. It was still there. My code, still the engine of the company I'd been erased from. I remember sitting back in my chair, heart pounding, not from rage, for validation. This was it, the first breadcrumb that would lead me all the way back to the throne. Over the next 4 years, I became 2 people. By day, I worked hard. I rebuilt my career under a new name, consulting for companies that value discretion. Quietly, I earned a reputation for fixing broken software no one else could understand. I didn't post. I didn't tweet. I built in the shadows. And by night, I investigated. I started compiling a dossier. Nothing too dramatic at first, just screenshots, timestamps, web archives. But eventually I dug deeper. I found former employees Darren had underpaid and ghosted. Investors he lied to about product capabilities. A warehouse vendor who had been promised equity but never received it. And eventually, through a complex web of dummy LLCs, I traced how Darren funneled early capital into a shell company owned by his cousin and used it to pay himself tax-free. It was fraud on multiple levels, and nobody had caught it because Darren was charming and his pitch was tight. But cracks were spreading. I couldn't do it alone, so I began reaching out carefully. The first person I contacted was Sarah, the original product manager we hired back in the early days. She had left Darren's company years ago, and when I reached out anonymously asking if she ever had questions about how things went down, she replied within 5 minutes. Don't know who you are, but yes. All the time. Call me. She didn't know the full story. Darren had told her I had a mental breakdown and walked away. When I explained what really happened, she sat in stunned silence for a long time. Then she said, I always knew something didn't add up. Count me in. That was the beginning. Within 6 months, I had a network of former insiders, developers, admins. A disgruntled co-founder Darren had tried to bring in after me, who had also been ousted once he became inconvenient. Everyone had a piece of the puzzle, and I was the one assembling it. I didn't want revenge just for me anymore. This man had screwed over dozens of people. The world needed to know, but I still had to be patient. Exposing someone like Darren is like setting a trap for a king cobra. If you move too fast, they strike. You have to wait until they're fully exposed, vulnerable, and then strike hard enough they never get back up. I waited until Darren announced he was going public, a pre-IPO announcement that got picked up by every major startup newsletter. That's when I knew it was time, because during IPO due diligence, everything is scrutinized. And if the right people looked in the right places and found the right evidence, the house of cards would collapse. I didn't just email the SEC. I delivered a digital package full of receipts, timelines, affidavits, and a breakdown of every major lie. But I didn't stop there. I leaked the story anonymously to a major tech journalist I knew through a client. The headline hit 2 weeks later. Neuroport's shady origins. Former co-founder accuses CEO of fraud, IP theft, and founder erasure. The fallout? Oh, you want to hear that next. The article went live at 9:02 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 9:45, hashtag Neuroport scandal was trending on tech Twitter. By 11 o'clock, Darren had locked down all his social media accounts. And by 1 p.m., the company issued a no-comment statement that basically read like a confession. I had dropped the bomb. And the tremors? They were only beginning. Within 48 hours, multiple former employees came forward, confirming they'd been pressured to sign NDAs after being abruptly let go. One shared an email thread in which Darren explicitly instructed a team to find ways to obscure the old back-end code from audits. The smoking gun. Then came the investors. VCs hate surprises, especially the kind that can tank IPO valuations. One firm issued a public notice withdrawing their stake. Another leaked internal memos showing Darren had misrepresented client onboarding figures. Suddenly, the golden boy wasn't golden anymore. He was radioactive. You'd think that would be enough, right? It wasn't. Not for me. Because while the world now saw Darren for who he was, a thief in a suit, I needed one last moment. Not for them. For me. Through my network, I knew where Darren would be in 2 weeks. A closed-door panel with prospective IPO partners, trying to salvage what was left of Neuroport. I got invited. Not directly, but I had a friend, a mid-level exec in one of the partner firms, give me a guest badge under a different name. I wore a sharp suit, carried nothing but a tablet, and waited until the Q&A. Darren was trying his best, spinning everything as a distraction and unfounded bitterness. He used words like regret, lessons learned, and moving forward. I stood up, raised my hand, and when the moderator called on me, I spoke clearly into the mic. Can you explain how the original routing algorithm in your logistics engine was authored by a different co-founder, the one you erased from all company history, and why it still uses undocumented workarounds he designed before you locked him out? Darren froze, like physically froze. His eyes scanned the room, and I watched the recognition bloom. He knew me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked him in the eye. Then I sat down. The room erupted, not with applause, but with murmurs, doubt, confusion, embarrassment. 2 weeks later, Neuroport's IPO was postponed indefinitely, then canceled. The SEC investigation had begun. Several board members resigned. And Darren? He disappeared. Rumor has it he fled the country, holed up somewhere in Southeast Asia under a new identity. But honestly, I didn't care anymore, because he could run from the cameras, but not from the truth. And now the world finally knew it. The day the company officially shut down, I went for a walk. No champagne. No, I told you so. Just silence. I walked to the old coffee shop where Darren and I had first sketched out our business plan on a napkin. It had closed down years ago, now a vape shop with neon signs in the window. I stood there for a long time. Not because I missed it, but because I needed to see, really see, how far I had come. People think revenge is loud, but in that moment, mine was quiet. I didn't just beat Darren. I buried the version of me who needed his approval, the one who thought his success defined my worth. He took everything from me, but I rebuilt it piece by piece, stronger, sharper, better. And now, finally, I was free. Sometimes, justice doesn't come in a courtroom or a news headline. Sometimes, it comes when the world finally sees the truth, and you no longer need to scream it. Darren was my past, but I built my future. And that was the greatest revenge of all. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Make sure to subscribe because there are plenty more stories where this came from. And remember, never underestimate the quiet one. They might just be planning your downfall.